Bleach, the Thousand-Year Blood War plunges Ichigo Kurosaki into chaos as the Wandenreich, a hidden Quincy empire led by the fearsome Uwak, declares war on Soul Society. The Quincy Sternritter launches a devastating attack, wielding powers that strip Soul Reapers of their Bankais, leaving them defenseless. In a heroic but tragic stand, Captain Yamamoto is overpowered by Uwak, leaving Soul Society in ruins and leaderless. Witnessing the destruction and his friends wounded, Ichigo realizes he must push beyond his limits to face the Quincy. As Part 2 ended on the edge, it foreshadowed an epic showdown yet to come in Part 3 of Bleach, Thousand-Year Blood War. Episode 1 starts off with Uetsu and the rest of Squad Zero except for Senjumaru taking their own lives before he mutters the words. Suddenly, an immense wave of powerful aura erupts from where they are, blinding the Quincy with its brilliance. Senjumaru tells the Quincy warriors to prepare themselves as she activates her Bankai. Boosted by her new power, she got thanks to the Blood Seal oath breaking after the rest of the squad took their lives. Her Bankai, Shatatsu Karagara Shigarami, a beautiful intricate tapestry-like domain, places immense spiritual pressure on its surroundings, which even reaches Ichigo and the others down below the Soul King's palace. Ichigo tells everyone about Squad Zero's extraordinary abilities, which leads to them believing they could perhaps actually manage to defeat the Quincy and Uwak. Ichigo hopes so as well, although the expression he wears on his face is of deep concern. Senjumaru traps each of the Quincy warriors, one after the other, in her elaborate weaves. In complete control of the time and space around her domain, she utters phrases that emphasize the elegance and destructive power of the Bankai of the Soul King's Royal Guard, Shitara Senjumaru. Meanwhile, as Uwak starts walking away from the leader of the Royal Guard, Hyosube Ichibei, thinking he had defeated him. The flames on Ichibei go out as he announces the name of his power, Black, that allows him to take away the powers and identity of anyone painted by his brush. Demonstrating his powers on Uwak, Ichibei takes away his name and identity, taking his powers as a result too. This is the Bankai of the leader of the Royal Guards, Hyosube Ichibei, who then uses his sword brush to give Uwak his new identity and name, Black Ant, rendering the great power of Uwak to that of a lowly ant. I couldn't imagine it. The words Uwak mutter before Ichibei stomps him with his giant leg and crushes him between his massive hands, sending the ruler of the Quincy flying away, finally defeated, it seemed. Falling, Uwak completes his sentence from earlier. I couldn't imagine I could see so much with my eyes closed, as two pupils appear in his eyes, and he transports directly back to Ichibei, striking him with his sword. Ichibei asks him how he was still alive, as the characters he wrote on him begin to dissipate. Ichibei looks on in shock as Jugram, the right-hand man of Uwak, explains that Uwak had been fighting with his eyes closed thus far to keep his power from going berserk. But now that 9 years had elapsed on it, he could finally open them again, regaining his true power, which lends him the ability to see and know everything prior to it happening, making any ability he sees with his eyes practically useless against him. This awakening of Uwak somehow released Ishida from his trap as well. However, Senjumaru appears to have no problem toying around with him as he tries desperately to evade her attacks. Announcing she will put an end to their kind who had been forsaken by the king and had outlived their time, Senjumaru releases a final onslaught on Ishida, capturing him in her weaves once more. Senjumaru takes out a needle. Right before she stabs the back of his neck to take him out once and for all, Ishida tells her he had a reason for fighting. For doing all this, Uwak asks Ichibei that he must be wondering why he's still alive, how his powers peeled away from him and why he is going to lose, and that he must want to know the answer. Uwak's insinuation that he will defeat Ichibei amuses him as he tells the Quincy Lord that, although he knew everything, he seems to have forgotten that all black belonged to him as he plunges the ethereal tower with ink. The whole atmosphere then goes black and white. Uwak gets trapped in the ink at his feet as Ichibei starts chanting a song. The song lyrics and rhythm evoke themes of rebirth, emphasizing the stake of this battle against Uwak, who intended to overthrow the Soul King, and therefore how Ichibei must make sure to stop Uwak once and for all before he could manage that. Once his song ends, Ichibei erects a sea of skulls and graves at his feet, activating Futen Tisatsu Ryo, built from 100 knights stolen from the Soul Society 100 years in the future, that turns the victims' bones, blood, and flesh black, returning them to darkness where even rebirth was not possible. But as Ichibei says the phrase that activates the ability, Uwak stuns Ichibei by saying it at the same time as him, testifying to his ability that could see everything beforehand. Invulnerable to anything and everything his eyes could see, Uwak asks Ichibei, did he still think of him as one without a name? Ichibei leaps towards Uwak, holding out his sword with the intention of impaling him, at which point Uwak proudly declares his name is Uwak, the one who will rob him of everything, as he holds out his hand and pops Ichibei like he was a bearded plum. On the other hand, Ishida starts overflowing with power due to his bond with Yuwatch, as Senjumaru wonders if that was the true power of a stern Ritter, the elite warriors of the Wandenreich led by Yuwak. Senjumaru chuckles at this little display from Ishida, if he thought he would be able to escape from her Bankai with it. But Ishida reveals that it was Senjumaru herself who had been caught in her own Bankai, as she finds herself wrapped in her own weaves. Ishida then draws his arrow, and swearing upon his honor as a Quincy, fires straight through the center of Senjumaru's chest, killing her in the process. This releases her Bankai, which Ichigo and the others sense as well. The Stern Ritter regain their freedom from Senjumaru's Bankai and are united with Yuwak in the next instant at the ethereal platform. Jugrom declares their 1,000 years of prayer were about to be answered at last, as Yuwak walks through his kneeling loyal men, setting his sights on his next target. The Soul King. Using material from the ethereal towers, Yuwak manifests a bridge to the Soul King's palace as he contemplates the end of their 1,000-year-long crusade with the demise of the Soul King. Ichigo and the others finally arrive at the Soul King's palace, wondering if the battle had already been over. They are horrified to see the remains of the Royal Guard's leader, Hyosube Ichibei. But Ichigo then starts hearing Ichibei's voice in his head, asking him to call out his name. Ichigo does so, and suddenly a fresh new Ichibei pops up from his own remains, terrifying everyone. Ichibei explains that thanks to their powers being combined, he was able to restore himself by taking a small fraction of Ichigo's power when he called his name out loud. Ichibei then starts laughing like a deranged old man, while Ichigo wonders about how messed up what he just did was. Ichibei tells Ichigo that he must stop Yuwak before he kills the Soul King and disrupts the balance of the three worlds, leading to their collapse and disappearance. Ichigo responds with a reassuring nod, and they head for the Soul King's tower. However, Yuwak has already reached the Soul King by that time and puts his sword through him. Bidding farewell to him, Yuwatch reveals himself to be the son of the Soul King, ending the episode with a major reveal. Last time on Bleach 1,000-Year Blood War, The Conflict, Senjumaru channels the powers of her fallen squad Zero Comrades and finds success in trapping the Stern Ritters in her Bankai. However, when Yuwak opens his eyes during his battle with Ichibei, the tide of the battle shifts and the Quincy defeat all the royal guards. Ichigo and the rest of the Soul Reapers finally make it to the palace, but Yuwatch, who had already reached the Soul King by then, impales him. What's to happen to reality in all three worlds as a result of this? And will Ichigo be able to stop Yuwak and the Quincies? Stay tuned to find out in episodes 2 and 3. Having pierced his sword straight through the Soul King, Yuwak asks him if he could hear the screaming within him and the voices of the ones he forsakes, referring to the Soul King's abandonment of the Quincies. Ichigo senses Yuwak's ominous presence at the Soul King's palace as he and the Soul Reapers head to the Soul King. Yuwak's actions create a rippling effect that is felt across the three worlds as tremors, signaling a serious threat was facing the Soul King. As Yuwak vows to put an end to the Soul King for the humiliation he had caused him and his people, Ichigo and the Soul Reapers finally arrive. Thanks to his all-seeing eyes, his true mark of being a Quincy, Yuwak knew beforehand about Ichigo's arrival and also of his intentions to stop him. Eager to see whether Ichigo's dual Zanbakuto in action, Yuwatch challenges him to see who shall remain on top. The two then engage in an epic nail-biting back-and-forth battle. The Quincy King unleashes some of his terrifying attacks during it, while Ichigo, thanks to his training with Squad Zero, doesn't shy away from demonstrating some of his newly acquired abilities. Shattering Yuwatch's Sankt Zwinger and sending him crashing into the ground with his Jujusho, it looks as if Ichigo had the almighty Quincy King on the ropes. Impressed by Ichigo's training that bore fruit in the form of his glorious new powers, Yuwatch praises him. However, Yuwak then makes the shocking reveal that he had not used his eyes even once during their battle. Announcing the start of the real battle, Yuwatch opens his eyes, unveiling the true extent of his unimaginable powers as an enormous amount of it flows out of him. Using his true power now, Yuwatch unloads a barrage of attacks, which Ichigo is barely able to evade thanks to his Getsugatensho. Ichigo tries but fails to land any blows on Yuwatch, who is able to predict Ichigo's every movement. The power difference between the two becomes very apparent when Yuwatch starts ragdolling Ichigo around. After noticing these tremors, Soifon and the others present in the Soul Society decide to head over to Urahara's research and development lab to ask for answers. Meanwhile, at the lab, Nanao asks Urahara why the Quincies didn't wipe out the Soul Reapers first, if the cause of their war was a result of the conflict between them, which happened 1,000 years ago. So why did the Quincy go straight to the Soul King Edenius and not finish things up with the Soul Reapers first? The reason was that the Soul King knew about the future. He had seen the tragedy that would befall the Quincy with his discerning eyes. But King had overlooked them both times they faced near extinction because they did not fit into the system of the world. Yuak had gone to him first, so he could kill the Soul King, his father, and create a new world. His face painted in his own blood, Ichigo grabs his Zangetsu. Declaring boldly that he will be protecting the three worlds no matter what, Ichigo lunges at Yuach, unleashing a Getsuga Tensho at point blank as Orihime heals him. Unfortunately, that is not enough to pierce through to Yuach, who calmly keeps Ichigo at bay. Meanwhile, Soifon and the others arrive at Urahara's lab, asking questions about the tremors. Urahara tells them they were most likely connected to the safety of the king. Yoriichi surrounds Yuach in her razor-sharp Tenshiheiso Hisakukumoi, warning Yuach not to move an inch or risk losing his limbs. Yuach, however, stands utterly unfazed and lights them up into flames, which catch onto a giant curtain behind him that reveals the impaled Soul King. Hoping for a chance to still save him, Ichigo bolts to him and immediately tries taking the sword out. However, because of the Quincy blood running through his veins, Yuak attains complete control over Ichigo through the spiritual pressure in his sword and makes Ichigo slice the king into two, announcing then that he needed someone like Ichigo, who had Quincy, human, Soul Reaper, Full Bringer, and hollow powers in them to break the king's seal. Ichigo kneels on the floor, frozen, as Yuak tells him everything he had achieved thus far in his journey through life, including awakening his Soul Reaper powers, was to lead him to this exact moment that he had foreseen. A brilliant light breaks out of the Soul King, followed by terrible earthquakes that are felt all across the three worlds. Suspecting the Soul King had been killed, Urahara and the others fear Armageddon was upon them, as the menacing Quincy King, Yuak, asks the bewildered Ichigo to witness the end of Soul Society with him. Certain something terrible had happened to the Soul King, Ukitake declares he will take the Soul King's place as he takes his robe off, revealing a mysterious black shadow emerging from his back. He then starts chanting something, a prayer his parents used to ask Mimihagi for his health back when he was a child dying of a lung disease. Mimihagi, the local deity of his home of Sakuhon, had saved Ukitake from death, although taking custody of his organs in return. As a young boy, Ukitake had started taking classes in the Soul Reaper Academy, although his lung condition persisted. After some years passed, Ukitake, a young man now, dueled against a young Shunsui, who didn't show him any mercy because of his illness. Although the match still ended in a draw, despite Ukitake's poor health with both of their wooden swords breaking. Ukitake then befriends the young Shunsui after being impressed by him during their classes. Although he is not too impressed when Shunsui gave him Monaka sweets that contained alcoholic leaves in them, which he wanted for the children. Some time passes, and Ukitake shows Shunsui the statue of Mimihagi. Seeing it, Shunsui ponders if the rumors of the high-ranking clans had indeed been true. Rumors that some time ago a divine power of the Soul King had detached and fallen to the living world. Shunsui points out that the shape of the statue was a hand, more precisely the left hand of the Soul King, which was responsible for the stillness in the universe that also granted Ukitake life. He had confirmed the rumors of the obscure deity to be true after he heard about Ukitake and finally met him. When the Central 46 tried to appoint a new lieutenant for Ukitake, in case he went down because of his illness, he refuses, stating simply that no one could replace Kain. Ukitake reminds them of their own rule about the responsibility of choosing a lieutenant lying on the squad captain, in this case Ukitake. As they mourn their fallen brother in arms, former head captain Yamato, Shunsui asks for some time alone, while Unohana bids farewell to Ukitake. Back at the present time, and the shadow suddenly balloons in size, taking the form of a giant eye as Ukitake performs the Kamikake ritual, a ritual that expanded the power of Mimihagi attached to Ukitake's lungs throughout his body. By giving all of his organs to Mimihagi, Ukitake had become its embodiment, representing the right hand of the Soul King himself. Ukitake had always been ready to sacrifice his life for this moment. Having anticipated it and thus performing Kamikake, the gallant, white-haired hero was ready to lay down his life for the one who had once given him the opportunity to live it. With flashbacks of their times together jumbling up in her head, Kuchiki calls out to her dear superior officer. But Ukitake, wanting her to stay strong in this difficult situation, reminds her about the two types of battles as the shadow grows stronger, inflicting even more damage to Ukitake. Meanwhile, Shunsui, thinking about the two battles, which were to either protect life or to defend honor, decides to take on the former one as he stands inside the prison cell holding the notorious Aizen Sosuke. The Soul King existed to stabilize the Soul Society, through which a great number of souls passed. Now with him gone, the Soul Society, along with the Precipice World, Hueco Mundo, and the world of the living will all soon cease to exist. Yuach pits the blame for this on Ichigo, sending him into a confused state of shock as he felt overwhelmed with guilt over what he had just done. On the other hand, Shihoin and the rest of the Soul Reapers launch a diversion attack on Yuach to keep him occupied, while Orihime tries to heal the Soul King using her powers. She fails to heal him as Yuach thwarts the Soul Reaper's coordinated attack on him like they were flies. Amused by their desperate attempt, Yuach tells them no mere mortal could possibly resurrect the Soul King. Meanwhile, the Mimihage deity channeling through Ukitake manages to reach the Soul King and stabilizes him. Even Yuach is shocked by this dark, shadowy figure that he didn't foresee. Shino asks Urahara how much longer Ukitake could remain as a stand-in for the Soul King, since the connection was probably going to break once he dies. Urahara didn't have the faintest idea regarding that, since this was his first time ever seeing something like this. However, it was imperative they find a way to stabilize the Soul King before this connection ended. Meanwhile, down in the dungeon where Aizen was being held prisoner, Shunsui enters and unlocks one of the many seals that had been placed on Aizen to seal away various parts of his person. Only unlocking his mouth, Shunsui is stunned when Aizen walks out to him just from that. Granted permission to free 3 of his seals, Shunsui unlocks Aizen's left eye and ankle as well. Shunsui proposes Aizen a deal where he would have him breathe the fresh air of Soul Society again in return for his cooperation in defeating Yuach and the Quincy's. When suddenly one of the guards rushes Aizen in order to properly restrain him and gets his arms blown up from his immense spiritual pressure. Aizen then tells Shunsui he had no interest in breathing the air of the Soul Society about to be crushed by Yuach. Last time on Bleach Thousand-Year Blood War, the conflict, Ukitake, having lived on through the powers of the right arm of the Soul King, Mimihage, nobly sacrifices himself in an attempt to stabilize the Soul King. Meanwhile, Shunsui goes over to Aizen and asks him to join forces with them in order to stop Yuach and his Quincy forces. However, Aizen expresses no concern regarding what happens to the 3 worlds. How long will Ukitake manage to hold this temporary stabilization? And will Ichigo and the others manage to stop Yuach from finishing off the Soul King? Find out in episode 4. The episode starts off with Ukitake's body barely holding on as Mimihage rushes out of him and rushes towards the dying Soul King. Everyone at the Research and Development Lab is deeply sorrowed by what is happening to Ukitake, but steadily yet surely, the tremors come to a pause. On the other side, at the Soul King's palace, his right arm, Mimihage, envelops the Soul King while Yuach looks on, stunned by a dark, shadowy apparition even his foreseeing eyes didn't predict. Yuach realizes quickly why that was the case, as his eyes not predicting the future of something could only mean it belonged to the Soul King himself. It puzzles Yuach that the Soul King, who was capable of seeing all, would be using his right arm to stand in his way. So he concludes it must not have his will in it. Yuach decides to eliminate this right arm as well when Ichigo suddenly breaks free from Yuach's control and wedges himself between the two. Yorichi realizes that the black, shadowy arm was stabilizing the Soul King, and so she quickly puts up a barrier around it to protect it. Desperately trying to fend off Yuach, Ichigo tells him he would stop him and protect everyone, no matter what. Yuach challenges Ichigo's mindset for being weak, and one that couldn't possibly hope to accomplish what Ichigo planned to by calling him out for still not using the word kill against him, suggesting he had no intention of killing Yuach, who was not only threatening to end the world but was also his mother's murderer. This messes with Ichigo's head, whose confidence takes a major blow as he is left rethinking his entire strategy. That's when Yorichi gets struck by a blue, spiritual power-based arrow in her back that breaks her sealing of the Soul King. It's Ishida. Seeing him catches Ichigo off guard, and Yuach starts approaching the Soul King once more. Ichigo tries to stop him again, but now with his conviction in a blur, Yuach throws him to one side the next second. Yorichi throws silver balls at Yuach that mark their target on the first hit and disintegrate them upon the next. But before she is able to deliver round 2, Peranctus, one of the Stein Ritters, tears up her entire arm with ease. Yuach then swipes at her, sending her falling down from the platform. As Yuach starts tearing apart Yorichi's barrier, Ichigo tries to stop him again, but Ishida's arrow had other plans. Ichigo snaps at Ishida, demanding an explanation for what he was doing right this instant, while Ishida maintains an indifferent attitude, only concerned with stopping anyone in Yuach's way, even if it were his best friend. Ichigo desperately tries to remind Ishida that not standing in Yuach's way meant the destruction of the 3 worlds. Ishida continues his indifferent attitude, stating he was well aware of his actions, but nothing mattered more to him than the duties that fell upon him as a Quincy, which really stings Ichigo, as if apparent by the obvious disappointment in his face. Meanwhile, the rest of the Stern Ritters show up as well. The 2 friends turned enemies, then go off in an epic battle, pitting the powers of a great Soul Reaper and a great Quincy on full display. Ishida gets caught off guard after he notices similar glowing blue lines across Ichigo's that were only seen on a Quincy, reminding him for a moment that the man he was trying to stop was more like him than he thought. And Ichigo wastes no time in taking advantage of this slip-up, as he grabs a firm hold of Ishida's collar. Still not giving up on his friend of several years, Ichigo tries to wake Ishida up from all this once more, when Ishida unleashes his powers, blowing Ichigo off him, donning new fantastic powers called the Quincy Vol Stern Ditch. Back at the Research and Development Lab, Urahara shows concern about finding a way to stabilize the king since Ukitake wasn't looking like he could hold on for too long. Ishida unleashes the full extent of his new powers on Ichigo, attacking him with hundreds of arrows simultaneously at terrifying speeds. While Ichigo does manage to evade his attacks, it looks as if Ishida had Ichigo on the ropes. At the same time, Ganju, Orihime, and Sato put up resistance against the Stern Ritter, giving it their best. However, it is far too insufficient, as the Quincy warriors remain unfazed as though they were being attacked by feathers. Gerard takes the responsibility of dispatching the measly Soul Reapers in front of him all by himself. Ganju fires a hail of firework bombs at them, but Gerard thwarts them off with just a single swing. His next swing is aimed at Ganju, but Orihime blocks the deadly blast just in the nick of time. From right behind her, Sato charges his mighty fist and lets loose a massive hit on them all, but astonishingly, they remain completely unfazed. As the Stern Ritters start getting overconfident, Ganju pulls off his final move, Renkin Seppasen, which creates a massive sinkhole right through the celestial platform, taking the 4 Quincy elite alongside it. But they shoot out of it the very next second, as it appears nothing they do would harm even a hair on their heads at this point. Having learnt about the 1,000-year war between the Quincies and the Soul Reapers had only confirmed it even more for Ishida that there was no common ground to be found between the two races. And at the end of the day, it was always Quincy blood that was needlessly spilt. Ukitake's state starts worsening, as Ewok starts removing the hold of Mimihagi from the Soul King. His suffering being too much to bear, Azane tries to save him from any further anguish when her younger sister and most devoted subordinate of Ukitake, Kiyone, with a heavy heart, grabs a hold of her hand, motioning her not to do anything of the sort. Going up against his closest friend, Ishida had shown Ichigo his resolve. Demanding they settle it right now, Ishida challenges Ichigo to show him his conviction as well in what he was fighting for. What follows is a glorious clash between Getsuga Jujiso and Sternenstab, resulting in both attacks disintegrating the other. Ishida makes it clear to Ichigo he was not going to allow him or anyone else to come between Ewok's plan. Burdened by the overwhelming pressure of it all, Ichigo stands still for a moment, as though inviting Ishida to attack him, and then suddenly, with a wave of his arms, he begins to release another attack on Ishida. However, striking first, Ishida fires a lightning-fast arrow that blasts off a major portion of Ichigo's torso on the right. Struck by the same man who had previously risked his life for him, Ichigo starts slowly falling down, in a state of disbelief at what Ishida had just done. This cold-blooded backstabbing from Ishida against his own comrades gets recognized by Gerard, who formally welcomes the new Quincy warrior into their ranks. In the final scene, Ewok finally manages to completely rid the Soul King of Mimihagi. Ewok, who is now more powerful than the Soul King, forms a sword made from the spiritual energy of his loyal servants, and slices the Soul King out of his capsule. Announcing he would restore the world to the way it was meant to be, Ewok starts absorbing the Soul King's powers. Blinding blue lights emerge during the process, as Ewok finally completes the transfer, unveiling a set of several hellish eyes in his newly transformed state that was equipped with the almighty powers of the Soul King in addition to his own, at which point the episode comes to an end. Last time on Bleach 1000-Year Blood War: The Conflict, friends turned foes, Ichigo and Ishida face off as Ishida tries to stop Ichigo from getting in Ewok's way. Donning a new transformation, Ishida confirms once and for all where his loyalty lies by taking out Ichigo as Ewok successfully removes Mimihagi from the Soul King and absorbs his powers. Is it over for Ichigo and everyone else? Or will fate somehow favor the Soul Reapers? Let's find out in episode 5. The episode starts off with a massive flood of some sort of black matter emerging from the Soul Shield membrane into the Seirete. In an attempt to keep the Research and Development Lab safe, Shuhei, Ikaku, and Yumichika put up resistance against the enormous swarm of what appears to be tiny leech-like creatures. Meanwhile, Byakuya, using his Senbon Zakura, exquisitely clears through scores of the tiny devilish creatures. However, their numbers just don't seem to quiet down, as tons more of them gather into a colossal wave that did not seem like it would go down easy when suddenly they all get crushed like grapes. It was Aizen's doing. Using his incredibly strong spiritual pressure, he swiftly solves the problem like a boss. Seeing Aizen out like this, the rest express serious opposition against this decision by Kyoraku. However, Kyoraku quickly reminds them of the situation in which they were in, with the world on the brink of ending. Using evil in order to defeat evil was not an evil act if it meant the world could be saved by it. Aizen asks Kyoraku to free him, so he could effectively get rid of the eyeball creatures now that they had become allies for the moment. But Kyoraku doesn't fall for it, knowing Aizen didn't need to be released to be able to take care of these things. And that's exactly what happens next. Aizen then uses Kurohitsuki to try and break free. But despite his impressive technique, which he showcased without even saying the incantation, Aizen isn't able to break free from his confinement. Aizen theorizes that the eyeball creatures were probably remnants of Yuok's power that poured out while he was trying to absorb the Soul King's powers. And it will take a little while before he is able to completely make them his own. Offering to eliminate the problem of getting to the Soul Palace, Aizen tries to shoot down the Soul Palace, but his powers suddenly disappear. The chair Aizen sat on had the ability to restrain his spiritual pressure around his body, and quite effectively at that. Kurotsuchi, the inventor of the contraption, then shows up, boasting that no matter how powerful Aizen was, he was not going to overpower his machine. Aizen then challenges Kurotsuchi to test whether his powers or his invention are superior, when all of a sudden he gets struck by a bolt of bright yellow spiritual energy. It's Najakup and the Forsaken Quincy's, here to prevent the Soul Reapers from shooting down the Soul Palace while Yuok was still in there. Kyoraku tells Urahara to quickly open the gate to the Soul Palace. He then asks Najakup if he was here to help them by any chance, to which Najakup replies with a stern no. Having already known things weren't going to be that convenient, Kyoraku places his hand on his Zanpakuto, ready to engage in battle, but before he could do anything, Najakup abruptly gets impaled right through the chest from the back by Bazard. Bazard and the rest of the Quincy's offer to join forces with the Soul Reapers to try and take the Quincy King down, but on the condition of a ceasefire, and that they be taken alongside them to the royal palace so they could kill Yewatch themselves for abandoning them. Kyoraku then addresses the entirety of Seirete, calling on all of them to gather around the Lab of Research and Development, requesting they donate some of their spiritual energy as the gate to the Soul Palace required a considerable amount of spiritual energy to open. Battered and bruised, but their spirits still not defeated, the Soul Reapers pick themselves up as they make their way over to the Department of Research and Development. Kenpachi then appears and starts asking about the whereabouts of his lieutenant and dear friend Yachiru. Learning there was still no sign of her, despite the search efforts by the Soul Reapers, Kenpachi decides to take matters into his own hands. However, he finds Nanao blocking his path, requesting he have faith in his comrades and instead make himself useful by going over to the R&D department to donate his spiritual energy, which was desperately needed right now to build the gate. Uncharacteristically, Kenpachi agrees with Nanao's reasoning and heads over to the R&D department. Taking center stage at the very top, Kyoraku addresses everyone present there. With the Soul Society, living in the precipice world, basically all of reality on the verge of collapsing, Kyoraku asks everyone there to forget their past grudges and grievances for the moment, urging them to instead focus their everything into stopping Yewatch. The brave captain's powerful words resonate deeply with the audience. The plan was to build the gate, open it here, and storm the Soul Palace. Hiyori, carrying a giant water spout, makes an entrance. Shinji doesn't hesitate to express his shock over seeing her there, to which Hiyori gets mad since she had been busy doing his errands all this time. As soon as the two stop bickering like little kids, Hiyori starts pouring out the content of the water spout, a clear liquid that didn't wet anyone who made contact with it. Urahara explains that it was made from the distortion between the three worlds and was the source of the energy they'll need to head into the royal palace. As soon as Hiyori is done pouring it, Urahara asks Love and the others to go to the autopsy room and put on their shihakusho, the black outfit that the Soul Reapers wore, and return back here. Love throws Hiyori over his shoulders like a bag, and they all go over to change. Meanwhile, Aizen starts moving again after the immobilizing effects of Najakup start to wear off. He tells Kyoraku he wouldn't get a better chance to kill him than this. Kyoraku replies he would have done so if he could ages ago, attesting to the formidability of the former squad captain. Kyoraku expresses pity for Najakup, who, despite landing a clean strike, was only able to immobilize Aizen for a mere 5 minutes. Kyoraku then proceeds to leave for the R&D department and tells Aizen to chill, basically until the gate is ready. Sparks fly as the gate starts to form. But before going in, Urahara warns everyone about the possibility of no return once they enter. Soifon throws his words back at him for assuming something as little as that would discourage the honorable 13 court guard squads. Kenpachi, in total Kenpachi fashion, complains about hurrying up and going inside already, so he could crush the enemy. As the lot prepare to enter, observing the odd spectacle of the Soul Reapers and the Quincy's joining forces to fight a common threat, Aizen found it amusingly ironic that Ichigo, the man who tried so hard to stop him from entering the royal palace, was now there. Around the same time, back at the royal palace, Ichigo regains consciousness and is back to normal again. The reason behind it was Inoue, who had been tirelessly healing them all this time, even through the mighty roars of her empty stomach. Now with everyone all healed, she could finally rest. Ichigo then confirms their worst fears. Ishida really had turned over to the wrong side. Inoue then tells Ichigo of Kan's heroics, as he had inflated himself up, which prevented Ichigo's fall. Ichigo leads the prayer for the deceased, as if Kan had died, and Kan quickly gets up to give Ichigo a piece of his mind. Expecting an argument, Kan gets surprised when Ichigo offers him his thanks for saving him. Back to business, Yoruichi figures it won't be long till the space around them starts collapsing, as it had already been a while since Ewok had absorbed the Soul King's powers. Ichigo agrees with her on this, although he is puzzled by how they were going to manage getting back up there without getting noticed by Ewok or any of his loyal servants. Yoruichi tells Ichigo not to worry about that, as all of a sudden, the space in front of her starts distorting and opening up only to reveal Grimjo. Stay connected, like and subscribe for more fun recaps on One and Only Endless Recaps.